On a warm summer afternoon in suburban Atlanta, Jeremiah Brooks, a retired police sergeant with over 15 years of service, leaned back in his lounge chair, eyes closed, soaking in the sweet reward of years of sacrifice. His dream had finally come true. After 2 decades of late-night patrols, missed holidays, and saving every cent, he had purchased the home he once only admired in magazines, a stunning two-story house with white columns, cherry wood floors, and a crystal-clear pool that shimmered beneath the Georgia sun like glass. But just as Jeremiah let out a sigh of peace, a sharp wail of police sirens shattered the quiet. Two squad cars skidded to a stop outside his gate. Officers stepped out, hands near their holsters. "Sir, we got a report about a suspicious person trespassing near the pool," one officer called. Jeremiah opened his eyes, heart sinking. He didn't need to guess who made the call. From behind lace curtains across the street, Margaret Delaney, his neighbor, watched with that same tight-lipped smile she'd worn since he moved in. This wasn't the first time, but deep down Jeremiah knew this time would be different. 2 months earlier, the day Jeremiah Brooks moved into Oak Ridge Estates was supposed to mark a new beginning. After years of risking his life in the force, he had earned this. The movers had barely finished unloading the last box when he stepped into the backyard and saw it. The pool, his pool, glistening like a dream. A few feet away, doves cooed in the trees, and the scent of jasmine danced through the air. For once, peace didn't feel like a fantasy. That illusion shattered within 24 hours. As Jeremiah arranged patio chairs by the pool, he caught sight of her, Margaret Delaney. She stood in her upstairs window like a gargoyle, arms crossed, phone pressed to her ear. Their eyes met. He smiled and waved. She didn't wave back. She disappeared. The next morning, Jeremiah made a quick trip to the hardware store. His phone buzzed, a motion alert from his security system. When he opened the footage, he froze. Margaret was in his backyard. Wearing a sun hat and designer swimsuit, she strolled through his unlocked gate like it was her own private resort. She set down her monogrammed towel on one of his chairs, dipped her feet in the pool, and popped open a can of sparkling water. She looked relaxed, entitled, like she belonged there. When Jeremiah pulled into his driveway minutes later and stepped into the yard, she didn't even flinch. "Oh," she gasped, placing a hand to her chest in fake surprise. "I thought you were the pool guy. The last owners always let me use it." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but her eyes said something else. "What are you doing here?" Jeremiah took a breath, calling on years of de-escalation training. "Ma'am, I'm not the pool guy. I'm the new owner," he said calmly. "And I'd appreciate it if you didn't enter my property without permission." There was a pause, a smirk, and then laughter. Nervous, dismissive. "You're the owner," she repeated as if the idea were too ridiculous to accept. "I know the realtor who sold this place, and she didn't mention—" Her voice trailed off. She gestured vaguely toward him, letting her implication dangle in the air like rotten fruit. Jeremiah's jaw clenched. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Delaney," he said. "This is my home, and right now you're trespassing." Her expression tightened, but she said nothing more. She packed her things slowly, muttering, "We'll see about that." He did see. Again and again. The following weeks became a bizarre war of nerves. Jeremiah woke one Saturday to the sound of splashing. Rushing to his window, he couldn't believe what he saw. Margaret and 4 friends in swimsuits, sipping wine, playing music, and laughing as if the backyard belonged to them. Jeremiah stepped outside. "You all need to leave. This is private property." "Oh, come on," Margaret replied, rolling her eyes. "It's just a little fun. Besides, you hardly use the pool." Her friends shifted awkwardly, clearly not expecting a confrontation. "She told us she had permission," one woman murmured, already grabbing her things. "This is your final warning," Jeremiah said, voice firm. "Next time, I'm calling the police." Margaret scoffed. "Go ahead. My husband plays golf with Captain Rawlins. I know people." That afternoon, Jeremiah installed more security cameras. He wasn't just documenting her actions anymore. He was preparing for war. He didn't know it then, but he was only getting started. It didn't take long for Margaret Delaney to turn from nuisance to full-blown menace. At first it was petty, the kind of passive-aggressive warfare that upper-class neighborhoods were infamous for. Jeremiah's morning paper began disappearing. Anonymous complaints were suddenly flooding the HOA about his overgrown lawn or suspicious guests, despite his yard being trimmed like a golf course and his visitors limited to old friends and his mother. His mailbox was dented one morning. Another day, his trash bin had been tipped, its contents scattered like confetti across his driveway. But the cameras saw everything. Margaret didn't just walk by and glare anymore. She'd sneak into his yard at dawn, wearing gloves, crouching near his rose bushes, the very ones he'd spent weeks nursing to bloom. One grainy clip showed her sprinkling something around their base under cover of darkness. The next day, the petals browned, then fell. Poison. Jeremiah saved every second of footage. He cataloged timestamps, built folders. This wasn't just paranoia. It was documentation, evidence. Every clip was a brick in the legal wall he was quietly stacking, one trespass at a time. The final straw came on a Thursday afternoon. Jeremiah returned from the grocery store and saw them, 8 women lounging around his pool, sipping wine like they were at a spa resort. The laughter, the clink of glasses, the jazz music humming from a Bluetooth speaker. And there at the center was Margaret, wearing a silk cover-up and mirrored sunglasses, holding court like she was hosting an elite country club event. Jeremiah's patience snapped. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He called the police. 2 officers arrived, Davis and Martinez. Jeremiah had served with both. When they saw him, the shift in tone was immediate. "Jeremiah?" "Long time, man," Officer Davis greeted, then glanced around. "Oh, it's this kind of call." Margaret, ever the actress, instantly shifted into victim mode. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man has been harassing us all afternoon. I've always had access to this pool. The previous owners—" "Ma'am," Officer Martinez interrupted, his tone flat. "This man is a respected former officer. If he says you're trespassing, then you're trespassing. You and your guests need to leave now." The air went still. Margaret's mask cracked for a brief moment, humiliation flashing across her face like a storm cloud. Her friends quickly gathered their belongings, murmuring awkward apologies as they left in dripping disarray. But Margaret paused at the gate. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You don't belong here, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." Jeremiah didn't respond. He didn't have to, because by now he had a plan. Over the following days, the pressure from Margaret grew darker, more organized. Posts began appearing in the neighborhood's private Facebook group from concerned residents about strange cars parked near Jeremiah's home. One even asked if he was running some kind of business out of his garage. Then came the HOA meeting. Margaret stood, papers in hand, and in her most polished voice said, "I'm concerned about our property values. Certain changes in the neighborhood have made potential buyers uncomfortable." Her gaze drifted directly to Jeremiah. He stood calmly, reached into his jacket, and pulled out his phone. "I'm concerned too," he said, walking to the center of the room. "For instance, about this footage of you trespassing and vandalizing my garden last Tuesday at 11:47 p.m. He pressed play. The room fell silent. The video was clear, damning. Margaret crouched beside his flower bed, sprinkling poison. One woman gasped. Another man muttered "unbelievable" under his breath. Margaret turned pale. Her excuses trailed off. But this time, no one believed her. That night, Jeremiah walked out to his backyard and saw it. His pool once again tampered with. This time, someone had poured dish soap into the water, filling it with bubbles like a giant, mocking bathtub. He stared for a long moment, then smiled. Enough was enough. If Margaret wanted to keep playing games with his pool, then he'd give her a game she would never forget. And he would do it the smart way, the legal way, the unforgettable way. That night, as soap bubbles drifted lazily across his once pristine pool, Jeremiah sat on his patio with a glass of iced tea and a notepad. He'd seen his share of confrontation on the force, armed suspects, volatile standoffs. But Margaret Delaney, she was something else. She didn't throw punches or brandish weapons. She used reputation, implication, and gossip. She weaponized entitlement. But Jeremiah wasn't just a former cop. He was a strategist. He remembered a conversation he once had with his old partner during a pool inspection case about a special kind of maintenance dye. Non-toxic, undetectable until it interacted with certain chemicals, specifically the kind found in luxury sunscreens and high-end cosmetics. The idea had seemed funny back then. Now it felt poetic. He did his research carefully. The dye was harmless, approved for pool safety testing, and activated only when it came in contact with ingredients like titanium dioxide or avobenzone, common in the expensive brands women like Margaret adored. Even better, the color it produced, a vibrant, unmistakable green, not permanent, not dangerous, but extremely hard to wash off for at least a week. Jeremiah placed the order, 2 bottles, overnight shipping, but he didn't stop there. He tested it first. In a plastic bucket, he poured pool water, a small drop of the dye, and just a dab of the same sunscreen Margaret had left behind on his chair weeks ago. Within seconds, the water turned emerald. The test was perfect, harmless, discreet, but humiliating. A quiet lesson for those who believed the rules didn't apply to them. The next part required timing. Jeremiah had a hunch. Margaret wasn't done. He'd overheard her during one of her phone calls in her yard, loud enough for anyone nearby to catch. "He's usually gone all day on Saturdays," she'd said. "Bring your best swimsuit." Code 4, another unauthorized pool party was coming, and so he prepared. He added 3 new hidden cameras, smaller, high resolution, placed in clever angles to capture everything from the gate to the diving board. Then, the morning before the anticipated invasion, he added the dye to the pool in exact measurements as recommended by the manufacturer. To the naked eye, the water looked perfect, crystal clear, shimmering in the sunlight. That Saturday morning, Jeremiah made sure Margaret saw him pack his car. He loaded a beach chair, a cooler, and a novel, then drove away. Except he didn't go far. He parked 2 blocks down, circled back through a neighbor's side gate, and slipped into his home office upstairs, direct view of the backyard. Phone in hand, camera feeds live. He waited. At 1:54 p.m., the first ping arrived. Motion at the back gate. Margaret, dressed in a flowing white cover-up, led the charge. 6 women followed, each dripping in designer fashion. Beach bags, mirrored sunglasses, and the unmistakable scent of imported sunscreen. They made themselves at home like clockwork. Chairs unfolded, champagne popped. Jazz music floated through the air. "Ladies," Margaret announced, lifting her glass, "welcome to our Saturday sanctuary. What the new owner doesn't know won't hurt him." The women giggled, relaxing. One by one, they applied generous layers of lotion. Then Margaret, ever the queen bee, dove in first, graceful, smug. Moments later, it began. A shriek pierced the air. "Oh my God! Karen, your arms!" "What the hell? My legs! What's happening?" Jeremiah leaned forward. The cameras caught it all. Skin turning a vibrant green, like the cast of a bad sci-fi movie. The women scrambled out, gasping in horror. Makeup ran, hair tangled, expensive towels turned into makeshift shields. Margaret stood dripping, her skin glowing chartreuse, her scream rattling birds from trees. Jeremiah hit record. Sometimes the best way to deal with a bully isn't with fists or fury, it's with flawless execution. By the time Margaret and her green-tinted entourage stumbled out of Jeremiah's yard, the neighborhood had already begun to whisper. One woman ran barefoot across the sidewalk, screaming into her phone. Another tried to use a silk scarf to cover her neon legs. And Margaret, soaked, furious, and glowing like a radioactive lizard, was dead silent, eyes wide with the dawning horror of what had just happened. She spotted one of the tiny security cameras, blinking gently from the trellis, and that's when she knew. It had all been recorded. Jeremiah didn't rush. He spent the rest of that Saturday evening calmly editing the footage on his laptop, sipping lemonade as the sun dipped below the trees. The video started with Margaret's earlier intrusions, her smug expressions, her blatant trespassing, the book club by the pool. Then came the climax, the unauthorized party, the green transformation, the mass exodus of shrieking women. All of it underscored by the same jazz track they'd played that day, now turned into a darkly comic anthem. By Sunday morning, the video hit social media. Within hours, it exploded. Entitled "Karen Gets Dyed Green for Trespassing." Neighborhood hero outsmarts HOA bully. Revenge served cold and chlorinated. It was everywhere. Local news picked it up first. Then came the national accounts. Memes were made. Reaction videos. Hashtags trended. Just green with entitlement. Pool party gone wrong. And the crowd favorite. Not so private property. Jeremiah didn't post a single comment. He didn't need to. The internet did the rest. By Monday morning, Margaret's real estate agency released a statement. We take property rights seriously. The actions shown in the video do not reflect our company's values. The company removed her profile from their website. Their Facebook page was flooded with green emojis and sarcastic reviews. The HOA thread that once brimmed with subtle accusations and passive-aggressive jabs suddenly transformed. She did the same thing to us last year, someone posted. Remember when she called the cops on the Johnson kids' lemonade stand? Another neighbor chimed in. She told my daughter her hijab was making people uncomfortable at the mailbox, someone else wrote. The silence that had protected Margaret was gone. Her influence evaporated like pool water on a hot day. She tried to fight back. On Tuesday, she posted her own video. Makeup thick, hair stiff, her skin still faintly green around the edges of her neck. I was just trying to maintain neighborhood standards, she began. This man humiliated us intentionally. It's not fair. But all anyone could see was the irony. The woman who policed the community was now the subject of ridicule. The comment section exploded. Standards? You broke into his pool. Did the HOA approve that shade of green? Some people install fences. Jeremiah installed karma. Her lawyer sent Jeremiah a cease and desist letter, claiming the video was defamatory. Jeremiah responded with a simple email, a video compilation of her trespassing. Timestamped. Police reports attached. All legal, all real. And so the cease part came swiftly. The desist? Not so much. At the next HOA meeting, Margaret tried to act unfazed. She stood with a clipboard, cleared her throat, and began, I'd like to discuss the dangers of unauthorized chemical use in neighborhood pools. A quiet hum started in the back of the room. It's not easy. Being green. The room burst into laughter. Margaret dropped her papers and stormed out, cheeks redder than her sunburned shoulders. From that day on, things changed. Neighbors who once avoided Jeremiah now greeted him warmly. Mrs. Rodriguez brought over empanadas and apologized. She told me my lawn flamingos were a cultural eyesore. I should have spoken up. Even Margaret's closest allies stopped returning her calls. The few still bearing green stains on their skin avoided her altogether, their embarrassment too raw. And on the corner lot, a small "for sale" sign finally appeared on Margaret's lawn. Jeremiah didn't celebrate. He just turned on the sprinklers, poured another glass of lemonade, and watched the bubbles disappear from his pool. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting debacle, a moving truck backed into Margaret Delaney's driveway. No one came out to wave goodbye. She tried to keep a low profile, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, but the faint green tint still lingered along her neck and wrists, a stubborn reminder that some stains, while temporary on the skin, were permanent on reputation. As boxes were carried out and furniture wrapped in plastic, the only sound Margaret heard was laughter coming from 2 houses down. Jeremiah was hosting one of his now famous weekend pool parties. Properly organized, warmly welcomed, and full of life. Children splashed in the water. Neighbors lounged under umbrellas, sipping lemonade and trading stories. There was music playing, ribs on the grill, and an ease in the air that hadn't existed before. Jeremiah had created what Margaret had always claimed she wanted: community. But instead of building it through control and exclusion, he did it with kindness, humor, and a quiet strength that refused to bow to entitlement. Tom, who lived 2 doors down, clinked a drink with Jeremiah as they manned the grill. You know, he said, I've lived here for 20 years. This is the first time I've really known my neighbors. Jeremiah smiled, flipping a rack of ribs. Sometimes it just takes one person to stir the water the wrong way, and another to clean it up. Across the street, the Rodriguez kids tiptoed past Margaret's house, wearing swim goggles and holding towels, whispering in exaggerated stage voices, Shh, don't tell Karen. Even the adults couldn't help but laugh. The story of Margaret's downfall had become neighborhood legend. Real estate agents now had to disclose it to potential buyers. "No, the pool dye won't affect your health," one agent explained to a young couple touring the house. "But yes, the video is real, and yes, the man next door is a bit of a local hero." Inside his home office, Jeremiah had framed a single photo near the pool gate. It showed 6 green-tinted women sprinting across the street in disarray, limbs flailing, towels trailing behind. Underneath, in elegant script, were the words, "Respect is earned. Trespassing is recorded." It became a running joke, but also a reminder of what happens when someone refuses to be bullied and does it with grace. Margaret tried one last time to reclaim her dignity. She organized a farewell neighborhood meeting under the guise of discussing community standards. Only 3 people showed up, and all of them wore small green ribbons in quiet solidarity with Jeremiah. She didn't even make it past her opening sentence before walking out, defeated and silent. When her moving truck finally pulled away, Jeremiah raised his glass of lemonade, not in celebration of her departure, but in gratitude. Not for revenge, but for resilience. Because in the end, what Margaret had meant to divide had only brought people together. A month later, a new family moved into her old house. An interracial couple with twin daughters who joined the local swim team. Jeremiah offered to help them practice after school. The girls were naturals in the water, and their laughter echoed off the backyard fences like music. Visitors often asked about the framed photo by the pool. Jeremiah would grin, tilt his head, and say, "That's just a little reminder that karma doesn't always knock. Sometimes it dives in head first." The cameras still stayed up, not out of fear, but habit. These days, they captured birthday parties, swim lessons, and impromptu barbecues under fairy lights. The pool, once a battleground, had become the heart of something beautiful. And Jeremiah? He just kept flipping ribs, waving to new neighbors, and watching the ripples fade across the water. Knowing that dignity, when guarded patiently, has a way of echoing louder than any scream. 1 year later, the green had long since faded, but its memory remained vibrant in Oak Ridge Estates. Jeremiah Brooks sat beneath the shade of his patio umbrella, watching the twin girls from next door race across the pool with synchronized strokes. Their mother, Alina, waved from the deck, laughing as their youngest splashed too hard and soaked her sundress. The sound of joy rippled through the backyard, echoing off the fences that had once felt like barriers. Now they were nothing more than gentle borders in a community finally breathing as one. A neighbor knocked gently on the side gate. It was Mrs. Rodriguez holding a foil-covered tray. "More empanadas," she smiled. "The girls said you're their swim coach now." "I don't know about coach," Jeremiah chuckled, "but I do yell, 'Go!' pretty loud." She laughed, and for a moment they both glanced across the street, where the house that once belonged to Margaret Delaney stood quieter, warmer, and finally at peace. The new owners had planted marigolds along the walkway. They kept the curtains open, and they waved when they passed. The transformation of the neighborhood hadn't come from angry speeches or public arguments. It had come from one man, standing firm, armed not with bitterness, but with evidence, humor, and unshakable integrity. Sometimes people asked him why he didn't fight back harder. "Why didn't you sue her? Why not call the press sooner? Why be so calm?" Jeremiah's answer was always the same. "Because I've seen what real chaos looks like. And this was just a lesson waiting to be taught. And karma, he'd learned, teaches best when it arrives quietly, with receipts." One afternoon, a news anchor from a local station emailed him. Margaret, now living in another state, was making headlines again, this time for demanding access to her neighbor's private tennis court. The article called it a dispute over entitlement. Jeremiah didn't even finish reading. He just smiled, marked the email as read, and returned to the backyard where real life was happening. The pool had become more than a place to cool off. It was where families gathered, where kids learned to swim, and where stories were shared over burgers and music. It was in many ways a monument to what resilience looked like. Near the gate, visitors often paused at the framed photo, the one showing 6 women in designer swimsuits sprinting down the street, dyed a brilliant shade of green. Some asked if it was real. Jeremiah would grin. "Oh, it's real, very real, and no one's ever tried to break in again." The HOA meetings these days were short, friendly, and refreshingly free of talk about property values. New neighbors were welcomed with potlucks, not suspicion. The Facebook group was filled with posts about community cleanups, recipe swaps, and lost dogs. Not baseless accusations. The ripple effect was undeniable. What began as a private battle had quietly inspired others to stand up, to document, to speak, to resist, but with dignity. That night, as stars shimmered over Georgia, Jeremiah floated alone in his pool, arms stretched wide, staring up at the sky. The water glowed gently from the lights below, undisturbed, calm. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need revenge. He had peace. And for a man who had once fought for order on the streets, this, this serene, steady stillness, was the greatest victory of all. If you've ever faced someone who tried to control, belittle, or erase your place in the world, remember Jeremiah Brooks. Because sometimes the most powerful response is to live well and let karma swim circles around them. It wasn't just the green dye, the viral video, or even the justice served that made Jeremiah Brooks a quiet legend in Oak Ridge Estates. It was what came after. The real power of his story wasn't in the revenge. It was in the ripple effect. Because the truth was, Jeremiah had never set out to embarrass Margaret. He didn't want a feud. He wanted peace, respect, and a place to belong. But when that peace was threatened, he didn't react with anger. He responded with patience, strategy, and grace. And that changed everything. Neighbors who once stayed silent now stood tall. Parents felt safer letting their children roam. Strangers knocked on his door, not with complaints, but with casseroles and questions about swim lessons. His backyard, once a battleground, had become a sanctuary. And while the frame photo near his pool still earned chuckles, it also served a deeper purpose. A quiet reminder that dignity doesn't have to shout to be heard. It just needs to stand firm. So if you're ever facing someone who tries to shrink your light, don't dim it. Let them see it, let it shine, and let karma take care of the rest. Life lesson: strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it records silently. Jeremiah Brooks didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw punches. He didn't retaliate with anger, even when he was pushed, disrespected, and targeted unfairly. Instead, he stood tall, with patience, strategy, and quiet dignity. That's the lesson. In a world where loudness often gets mistaken for power, real strength shows up differently. It shows up in calm restraint, in documenting the truth, in choosing to act with purpose instead of impulse. Jeremiah didn't need revenge to win. He needed clarity. He turned injustice into inspiration, humiliation into unity, a backyard pool into a symbol of community power. So here's what you take with you. When someone tries to steal your peace, don't hand it to them. When someone crosses the line, let your boundaries speak louder than your fists. And when someone underestimates you, just smile and let karma do the talking. Sometimes the most unforgettable justice comes not from retaliation, but from being unshakably right and unapologetically kind.